The Soviets finally, by early 1949, without saying a word and not announcing it to the media at all, Joseph Stalin relents, and he basically opens the railroad tracks again, gets rid of the barbed wire. This was a victory for the United States in the early Cold War. Now, how easy would it have been for President Truman to just say, you know what, forget it. We're not going to do that. We're not going to send in planes, because what if they get shot down? Then what do we do? Are we going to have to send in tanks to liberate West Berlin? What are we going to do about that? But Truman stood up to Joseph Stalin and he said, look, dude, we're not going to take it. You know, you're going to try this kind of nonsense, we're going to stand up to you. And that's exactly what happened. It is a great story. But it's not going to stop there. Throughout the world, Harry Truman is going to issue a very famous policy called the Truman Doctrine. And let's take a look at what it says. What it says is that the United States should support free peoples throughout the world who were resisting takeovers by armed minorities or outside pressures. We must assist free peoples to work out their own destinies in their own way. Which basically means that if there is a fight between freedom and communism, the United States will be there to stand up for freedom. Whether that means sending in money or troops or military advisors, wherever there is trouble, G.I. Joe is there. No, seriously, that's kind of what it is. You know, it's like, this is what the United States is going to do. And it's going to be a tremendous financial investment for the United States and a tremendous military investment for the United States. Because the responsibility is on us at that point to defend the world against communism. This is also known as containment policy, right? Containing an idea, containing communism. They used to say about Michael Jordan, right? You can't stop him, you can only hope to contain him. It's kind of like me when I get on the court, you know what I'm saying? But basically, yeah, when I'm playing by myself. But that's the thing. When you try to, you can't stop the idea, right? But you can try to contain its effects. And that's what the United States will do. One of the ways that they will do that is this. It's called the Marshall Plan in 1948. It is a European recovery program. Europe was going to be, Western Europe was in deep financial trouble, deep economic trouble because of the effects of World War II. As you guys know, World War II destroyed most of Europe. I don't know if you knew that. Bombed out buildings, shelled out houses, businesses that people can't rebuild, children without parents, families that are torn apart, all this kind of stuff. So in order to prevent a breeding ground for communism, because communism looks good when you're poor, right? It looks good when you're destitute. Because if you have nothing and the government says it's going to provide everything, it looks great. It's like, yes. So the United States is not going to let that happen. We are going to send money. And this is all the brainchild of a guy named George Marshall. He's our Secretary of State. And George Marshall suggests to our President Truman at the time, he's like, hey, I have an idea, okay, to prevent communism from spreading. Because guess what? Europe, communism was starting to bubble up, especially in places like France and places like Great Britain. Because again, poor, impoverished people with no money, communism looks great. So how do we do that? Well, let's do this. Let's send money. Let's send $12.5 billion of aid. We're going to send it to Western Europe first. We're going to send it mostly to France, Great Britain, West Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, the places in Eastern Europe that need it. And what we're going to do with that money is we're going to rebuild their factories. We're going to try to hook people up with jobs, job training, all that kind of stuff. We'll ask Eastern Europe and the United States or the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union is going to say, we don't need your stinking American money. They didn't want it. But still, what this did is it created an alliance, really, or the breeding ground for an alliance between the United States and Western Europe. It was a very, very, very smart move by the United States. If the United States had not done this, there is a good chance that Western Europe could have devolved, which is a funny word, but it just basically means it could have degenerated into poverty, degenerated into communism, and history could have been very, very different. So this is an example of containment, right? Containing the conditions of communism. Lots of money for back then, $12.5 billion. 1949, though, another nation, China, will become communist. This is going to be a shocker to the rest of the world. The United States, as part of its containment policy, had been trying to fund and train anti-communist military in China. And unfortunately, they were not able to stop this man named Mao Zedong. He was one of the most important people in the 20th century. Mao Zedong is, of course, a Marxist, a communist. He's going to get most of the peasants on his side and is going to be able to make China communist. This sends a huge shockwave throughout the United States. Like, oh my God. Russia's communist, Eastern Europe's communist, now China's communist? Oh, and we're not done, because 1949 is a great year. Oh my gosh, even this happens too. The Soviets get the bomb. And they make a big show of it too, actually. There was no television really at that point. But in the newspapers and the media, Stalin detonated an atomic bomb for all the newspapers to see so that they could show us that now we have two nuclear superpowers. So think about it, class. 1945 is such a great year, right? World War II is over. The soldiers come home, they see their wives, they're like, haven't seen you in years. America gives the GIs money to go buy homes, and they start building their first homes, and everything is great. The American dream starts. 4 years later, we have a bipolar world, a nuclear country in addition to the United States, threats all around, China becoming communist. Oh my gosh, in the space of 4 years. This is a very long, drawn-out, titanic struggle that the United States is going to be involved with for years. Oh no. What does the United States have to do? Form alliances. Build fallout shelters in the backyard. They formed this special group of nations called NATO in 1949 in response to that. NATO is an alliance where basically you have a defensive alliance. In other words, if, say, France is going to be attacked, this means that the United States will come to the aid of France. NATO is still in existence. Have you guys been following current events? What has the president of Russia been doing over the past year, you know? Yes, sir. That's right. I'll point my little laser pointer. I'll go here. This is the Ukraine, ladies and gents. This little country right here. Just last year, and even earlier this year, I almost said the Soviet Union. Russian President Vladimir Putin has invaded the eastern part of Ukraine. And so now the discussion is, what should NATO do? Does NATO want to start a war with Russia for attacking a member country? Now this is an older map, okay? If I were to extend all the nations that are blue now, it goes all the way down here, right up to Russia's border. Russia doesn't like that, right? Russia wants a buffer zone, which might be why they attacked Ukraine. We are still fighting some of the same battles as a result of the Cold War, even today. Impacts on the United States government. In America, we are going to see a huge increase in the amount of money spent on national defense. Notice that in this graph, right when the Berlin airlift takes place in 1948, right after that, the Soviets get the bomb. You've got NATO. Look at how much defense spending increases right there, right? It's not as much as in World War II, but it's significant. And it's only going to go up, and away. So, those are the big ideas of the Cold War. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of shelve this for right now, and we're going to talk about the 50s next week. I'm going to go over the quiz from last time. I don't have it by rows, so what I'm going to ask you to do is come up once I call your name, and we'll go over it very quickly. So, here we go. Christian Ayala.